The bottle hit the floor before anyone spoke. A sharp crack, liquid spreading across the white tile. Blue detergent bleeding like evidence. By the time Captain Amara Lewis bent to pick it up, 2 officers were already walking toward her, hands near their weapons, eyes already certain of her guilt. The night had chosen its script. The detergent crept outward in uneven lines, a slow blue tide finding the grooves between tiles. The smell of synthetic lemon rose sharply, cutting through the cool air of the supermarket. The sound of their footsteps was soft rubber against polish, quick, decisive, rehearsed. Amara's hand hovered above the broken bottle, then withdrew. There was no point in wiping it up. Some messes had to be seen, not cleaned. She straightened, met their eyes for the first time. They were young, that untested confidence of men still learning what power felt like in their hands. Officer Whelan in front, jaw set, body stiff. Officer Cruz just behind, less certain but no less ready. Both carried the same assumption, that every moment here belonged to them. "Ma'am," Whelan said. The word came out as an order, not an address. Amara didn't reply. The lights above hummed faintly, steady and cruel in their neutrality. Her reflection, caught in the convex mirror at the end of the aisle, looked almost serene. A woman in dark jeans and a grey jacket, one hand by her side, the other still hovering near the broken bottle. "Got a call about a theft," Cruz said. "Matches your description." Amara let the words settle. Theft, description, the choreography of presumption. She could almost feel the system moving beneath them. Invisible gears turning, ready to flatten nuance into narrative. Her voice was low, calm. "What description is that?" Cruz hesitated. Whelan filled the silence. "Female, black, mid-30s, dark jacket." Amara almost smiled, but didn't. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the pause, sterile and relentless. Her basket sat at her feet, a single loaf of bread, 2 apples, a bottle of soap. The kind of evidence that couldn't defend itself. "Show me your bag," Whelan said. There was no aggression in his tone, only the bureaucratic certainty of a man executing procedure. It was the calmness that made it cruel. Amara's eyes flicked to the ceiling. Cameras in every corner, red lights blinking like tiny heartbeats. She wondered if the footage would ever be reviewed, or if it would sit in digital storage until overwritten by the next ordinary injustice. Her purse hung from her shoulder, unzipped slightly. Inside it, wrapped in the folds of her wallet, lay her badge, her name engraved beneath the seal of the city. It was a symbol of order, of belonging, of authority. And in this moment it was useless. "You really want to do this here?" she asked quietly. The question wasn't challenge. It was prophecy. Whelan's jaw tightened. "Just cooperate, Mom." That word again, Mom, the language of control disguised as respect. She nodded once, slow. "All right." Her movements were deliberate as she set the basket aside and opened her purse wider. She reached inside, careful, her fingers brushing the metal edge of the badge. It felt hot, electric, like it could burn straight through fabric if she let it. She didn't take it out. Not yet. She lifted her wallet, her phone, a small receipt. Each gesture was a quiet act of defiance, neat, transparent, obedient, but never submissive. The officers watched her hands, their eyes sharp with expectation. The detergent spread farther, pooling around her boots. "You can check the cameras," she said softly. "You'll see I didn't take anything." "We will," Whelan replied. "But for now we need to make sure." Cruz stepped closer, the soles of his boots squeaking faintly in the spill. His radio crackled once, a burst of static, then silence. He glanced at his partner, uncertain. Amara noticed the hesitation. It was small, almost tender. The flicker of conscience before training drowned it out. The cashier at the end of the aisle pretended to rearrange candy bars, eyes darting up, then down. A couple near the frozen section slowed their cart, watching without watching. No one intervened. Silence held jurisdiction here. "Please step to the end of the aisle," Whelan said. Amara didn't move. She had seen this scene too many times. Different names, different faces, same choreography. The command, the compliance, the inevitable humiliation disguised as safety. She kept her voice level. "You're making a mistake." "Then you can clear it up," Cruz said quickly, almost kindly. Her gaze rested on him a moment longer. There was something human there still. He avoided her eyes. She closed the purse, the zipper, a clean metallic sound that sliced through the air. The hum of the lights seemed to grow louder, as though the building itself was waiting. "If I were you," she said finally, "I'd call a supervisor before you go any further." Whelan's lips parted, then pressed shut again. Pride and protocol wrestled behind his eyes. He didn't call anyone. Instead, he gestured toward the service desk. "Let's just talk over there." The detergent underfoot made each step a slow glide. She followed them to the open space near the registers, the world narrowing to the sound of radios, the staccato beep of a scanner, the distant cry of a child. People watched now. Phones hovered discreetly at chest level, cameras half hidden by palms. Amara stood still beneath the sterile lights, her posture straight, her face unreadable. Her badge burned quietly in her bag, a sun no one could see. Whelan spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, we've got the subject, cooperative, checking ID." The word subject landed heavier than intended. Cruz looked at her, uneasy now. "Do you have any identification, ma'am?" Her answer was a breath, calm and inevitable. "Yes." She reached slowly into her bag again, this time deliberate. No sudden movements. No misunderstanding. Her fingers found the badge, warm from her touch, but she didn't pull it out, not yet. Not here. The blue detergent still shimmered on the tile, a quiet pool of accusation. A janitor stood by with a mop, waiting for permission to erase it. The world had gone very still. Amara looked at the officers, then at the cameras, then back again. For a moment, everything in her face, discipline, weariness, moral certainty, seemed carved from stone. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Be sure of what you're about to do." The silence that followed was absolute, thick, mechanical, and charged. The hum of the lights, the camera's unblinking gaze, the blue stain spreading wider, all of it conspired into a single, suspended second. And in that stillness, before the system moved again, the night held its breath, waiting to see if it would repeat itself or change. The word came first, on shoplifting. Flat, bureaucratic, and absolute. It left Whelan's mouth without hesitation, heavy as a verdict. No evidence had been seen. None needed. The machine had spoken through him. Amara felt it hit the air, cold and official, sealing the moment. Around them the store stilled. The cashiers froze mid-motion. The low hum of the lights seemed to deepen into a tone she could feel in her ribs. Her voice, when it came, was controlled, professional. The cadence of someone who had written too many reports to ever lose composure. "I haven't taken anything, but calm in this system was the wrong language." They mistook it for insolence. "Ma'am, don't make this harder," Whelan said. Cruz had his radio in one hand now, muttering something into the static. Backup, maybe, or confirmation that the call was in progress. The word shoplifting repeated again over the channel, stripped of doubt, amplified into fact. Amara could feel the weight of their training pressing down, the urge to control the situation. It was not hatred that moved them. It was obedience. That was what made it worse. She took a slow breath. "Call your sergeant," she said again. Her voice didn't rise. She did not plead. The restraint in her tone seemed to aggravate them more than defiance would have. Whelan stepped forward, hand out. "Bag now!" Her fingers tightened on the strap. For a moment no one moved. She thought of the academy, of the mock scenarios, the voice of an instructor saying, "When authority is challenged, escalate to establish control." It was the gospel of order. She raised her chin slightly. "There's no need for this." Cruz shifted uneasily. "Ma'am, please." But the word please had no power here. Whelan reached. The motion was quick, just a hand brushing the strap, but that was all the world needed to tilt. Her body moved instinctively back, a defensive half-step. Not resistance, just space. But the choreography of presumption interpreted it differently. Whelan's voice cut through, sharp now. "Stop resisting." It happened fast. The basket clattered to the floor, fruit rolling under the shelves. The plastic cracked beneath boots. Cruz moved to her side, voice raised. "Ma'am, don't move." Hands gripped her arm, her shoulder. Her purse slid, the strap snapping. The badge inside struck the tile with a faint metallic sound no one noticed. She felt the first push, not brutal but decisive, the kind designed to remind someone where power lives. Her body hit the end cap shelf. The sound of a falling box of tissues is absurdly soft and followed. She steadied herself, voice low. "Officers, face the ground." The command was loud enough for the whole store to hear. Somewhere near the registers, a phone camera clicked on. A different kind of surveillance began. Her knee hit the tile first, then her hand, palm pressed into the cold. She could feel every detail. The smooth polish, the faint residue of cleaning agent, the vibration of footsteps. She didn't fight. She didn't speak. The floor became everything, horizon, gravity, judgment. Her cheek met the cold surface, the same tile she'd walked across minutes ago. The same tile cleaned nightly to erase what the day left behind. She could smell the detergent still drying nearby, the spill from earlier, mingling with the scent of plastic and metal and the faint trace of fear in the air. Whelan's voice came through her hair, clipped and performative. "You're being detained for shoplifting. Do not resist." She felt his knee on her back, not crushing, just heavy enough to remind her that stillness was not her choice. "Got her restrained," Cruz said into the radio. His tone was calm again, procedural. The system had returned to its rhythm. Around them, the world watched, but from a safe distance. A mother held her child closer. A man in a blue polo whispered something to his wife. The cashier's hand hovered over the screen, unsure whether to keep scanning items. Phones recorded, but no one intervened. Silence was the store's currency. No one wanted to spend it on truth. Amara's breath fogged the tile. She could see her reflection in the thin sheen of detergent, fractured, incomplete. The fluorescent light above turned her image pale, unfamiliar. For a brief moment, she thought of her mother, the way she used to press her palm against Amara's forehead before school, saying, "Don't let them bend you, baby." The memory passed like a pulse. "Where's the bag?" Cruz asked. "It's right there," Whelan answered. Amara heard the shuffle of movement, the opening of zippers, the sound of hands rifling through her things. The sound was surgical, impersonal. She wanted to tell them to be careful, that what they were touching represented years of service, of sacrifice, of belief. But she said nothing. The badge stayed buried beneath receipts and a folded grocery list. It gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light, unseen, as though waiting for its moment of testimony. "Nothing here," Cruz muttered. "No merchandise," Whelan hesitated. "Check the pockets." A pause. Then quieter. "There's nothing, man." The silence that followed was heavier than sound. It pressed against them all. The officers, the watching crowd, the woman on the floor. For the first time, Whelan's voice wavered. "Ma'am, you can stand up." Amara did not move immediately. She lifted her head slightly, her cheek leaving a faint mark of condensation on the tile. Her gaze met the ceiling, endless panels of white light humming like an indifferent god. When she spoke, her tone was flat. "You've made your point." Cruz stepped forward, reaching to help her up. She ignored his hand, rising on her own. Her knees trembled only slightly. Her jacket was askew, her dignity intact but bruised. She brushed the dust from her sleeves, eyes steady. "I told you to call your supervisor." Neither officer replied. The crowd was already dispersing, murmuring, their curiosity satisfied. The phones lowered, recordings ending in small digital clicks. Whelan cleared his throat. "We still need to verify your—" "Don't finish that sentence," she said. The authority in her voice cut through the air like a sudden break in static. Even standing under harsh light, even with her hair disheveled, she radiated a command that neither of them could explain. Whelan looked down, muttered something under his breath. Cruz bent to pick up the purse, his fingers brushing against the badge's edge inside. He froze. Amara saw it, the flicker of realization crossing his face followed by confusion. But he didn't take it out. Not yet. The store manager appeared then, a man in a cheap tie and nervous smile, asking if everything was handled. No one answered. Amara adjusted her jacket, looked once at the blue stain still spreading across the tile, the first evidence, and the truest one. Then she said quietly, "You've done what you came to do." Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of judgment. Not anger. She picked up her purse, her hands steady now, and began walking toward the front of the store. The two officers followed, slower, uncertainty replacing authority. As she passed the security mirror near the exit, her reflection stared back, upright, unbroken, framed in distortion. The fluorescent light caught the moisture on her cheek. Not tears, but the cold residue of the tile. Behind her, the floor gleamed, freshly marked, freshly mopped, erasing the evidence of what had just happened. And yet, somewhere deep within the building's hum, the silence of that moment remained, embedded like a scar in the tile. The floor had learned something that night, even if the system had not. The precinct at night was an organism of hums and low voices, air vents breathing through concrete, typewriters clicking like tiny heartbeats, a television murmuring news no one listened to. The building smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, the two scents that kept bureaucracy alive. Amara sat on a metal chair in the intake room, wrists free now but posture still bound. Her jacket was draped neatly over her knees. Across from her, Officer Whelan filled out a form with the mechanical certainty of habit. Each stroke of his pen declared something permanent. He didn't look at her much, not out of respect, but because looking too long made things too real. Cruz stood by the wall, shifting his weight. His earlier confidence had dissolved into a quiet, anxious obedience. The fluorescent light above them hummed, steady and white. It made everything equal. The guilty, the innocent, the merely accused. The light had no conscience. Name? Whelan said, eyes on the form. Amara Lewis. He wrote it down without recognition. The pen scratched paper, the sound dry and final. Address? She answered. Her tone was precise, measured. The rhythm of bureaucracy was familiar. She had lived in its cadence for years. He didn't ask if she understood her rights. The formality was implied, already forgotten. A sergeant passed through the hallway outside. Sergeant Calloway, his face carved with the boredom of routine. He nodded to Whelan as he entered, cup of coffee in hand. Shoplifting case. Yeah, Whelan said. From the supermart off Central. No stolen goods found, but she was acting suspicious. Probably ditched the stuff before we got there. Calloway grunted, indifferent. All right. Get her processed and logged. He glanced briefly toward Amara, then away, just another face in the night's rotation. Amara's eyes followed him. The badge inside her purse, now sitting on the metal desk, glinted faintly through the half-open flap. It was waiting, silent, patient. Cruz started collecting her personal effects. Wallet, phone, keys. He placed each item on the desk carefully, avoiding her gaze. His hand brushed the leather wallet and he hesitated again. The same small pause from the store, the flicker of unease. Whelan looked up. You okay? Cruz swallowed. Yeah, just... He stopped, thumb pressing against the edge of the wallet. Something metallic caught the light. He opened it. The room inhaled. The badge lay there, gold, precise, authoritative. Its emblem sharp under the desk lamp. For a second, no one spoke. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to dim. Whelan frowned. What is that? Cruz's voice dropped thin and disbelieving. Captain? Amara Lewis. He turned it over, reading the engraved name again, slower this time as though repetition could change its meaning. Whelan's face emptied. Captain? Calloway stopped mid-step at the doorway. What did you just say? Cruz held up the badge like something dangerous. His voice was flat now, stripped of anything but shock. Sir, she's one of ours. The silence that followed was absolute, the kind that swallows sound, thought, defense. The room, moments ago buzzing with mechanical life, froze into stillness. Amara sat unmoving. Her face gave nothing. The expression was not triumph, not fury, only clarity. Whelan's pen fell from his hand, the small click echoing louder than it should. He blinked twice, as if trying to wake himself. This has to be a mistake. Calloway stepped forward, his coffee forgotten. He reached for the badge, his hands suddenly careful. You're Captain Lewis from East Division? Amara met his gaze. I was. Her tone was steady, quiet, the kind of calm that made men nervous. Whelan opened his mouth to speak, but nothing coherent formed. Words stumbled out. You didn't identify yourself. You didn't ask. That ended it. The truth landed clean, without anger. The room contracted around it. Cruz looked sick now, his color draining. His hand still held the badge, but his arm trembled slightly, as if it weighed more than he could manage. Calloway exhaled slowly. Christ, he turned to the two officers. You brought in a captain. In cuffs? No cuffs, Whelan said quickly, desperate now. She wasn't cuffed. She was on the floor, Amara said, her voice cutting through the air like a file through metal. They all looked at her, waiting for more, but she gave them nothing. The lamp on the desk flickered once, its yellow light washing over the badge, the paperwork, the faces of three men suddenly exposed in their own reflection. Calloway's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he said, both of you, outside, now. The command carried no anger, only inevitability. Whelan hesitated, then obeyed, his boots dragging against the tile. Cruz followed, slower, glancing once more at Amara before the door closed behind them. The room was quieter now. The kind of quiet that bruises. Calloway set the badge down gently in front of her. It landed with a soft metallic sound like the punctuation of truth. "You could have told them," he said. Amara didn't answer. "Would have saved you the trouble." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "The trouble isn't mine." He looked away first. The moral geometry of the moment shifted entirely. Authority had inverted itself, and everyone could feel it. Calloway cleared his throat, searching for professionalism in the rubble. "I'll get internal affairs down here. You'll want to file a statement." She nodded once. "I'll wait." He started toward the door, then paused. "Captain? For what it's worth, don't! It wasn't cruelty. It was precision." He nodded, ashamed of his own instinct to apologize for a system he would defend again tomorrow. Then he left her alone with the sound of the building breathing around her. Amara leaned back in the chair. The badge glowed faintly under the desk lamp, haloed in bureaucratic light. Her hands rested in her lap, calm, folded, resolved. On the desk, Whelan's unfinished form still lay open. Across the top, under charge, the word shoplifting stared back in black ink. Amara reached for the pen and drew a single line through it. The ink bled slowly, erasing accusation with methodical grace. The clock on the wall ticked once, loud. Hollow, final. She placed the pen down, the sound echoing like a gavel. For a long moment, she sat there surrounded by paperwork, silence, and the faint hum of fluorescent light. In that sterile room, something larger than apology or outrage hung suspended. The knowledge of how quickly power turns on itself, and how rarely it learns. Outside the closed door, she could hear murmurs, hurried voices, the shuffle of boots, the beginning of excuses. She closed her eyes. The air felt colder now, but cleaner somehow. When she opened them again, the badge still gleamed before her, steady and unblinking, a mirror, a weapon, and a wound all at once. The conference room was colder than the precinct. Not by temperature, but by intent. Its walls were lined with acoustic panels meant to absorb sound, the kind that made confessions quieter, denials cleaner. A long table divided the space, lacquered wood under white light, the surface reflecting everyone's faces in faint, distorted symmetry. Captain Amara Lewis sat at the center, hands folded, the same jacket still on her shoulders. Across from her were three members of Internal Affairs, their suits precise, their expressions built for neutrality. Behind them a recorder blinked red, the only pulse in the room. The door closed with a hush that felt ceremonial. "Captain Lewis," said Investigator Rawlins, the man in the middle. His voice was calm, almost apologetic in rhythm. "We appreciate your cooperation tonight. This meeting will serve as a preliminary statement concerning the incident earlier this evening." His diction was perfect, the kind that could sterilize anything. Amara nodded. "Understood." To his right, Detective Shaw clicked her pen once, a sound sharp as punctuation. She adjusted her glasses and began, "We'll start by confirming the sequence of events. You entered the supermart around 1900 hours." "Yes. You were off duty?" "Yes. Unarmed?" Amara paused, not for effect but for precision. "I was armed, as permitted under Department Regulation 12B. My weapon remained holstered and concealed at all times." Shaw nodded without looking up. The pen moved quickly. Rawlins leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. "Describe what happened once the officers arrived." Amara's voice was steady, her tone stripped of everything but fact. "Two patrol officers entered the store in response to a call describing a suspicious woman pocketing items. I was in aisle 6. They approached me without introduction or request for identification. One officer asked what was in my bag. I explained I was still shopping." She stopped. Silence folded over the table. The hum of the fluorescent lights pressed down like a weight. Rawlins gestured gently. "Go on." Their tone shifted. "They asked me to empty my pockets. I refused. I told them they could review the store's footage if they had cause. They didn't listen." The younger officer, Whelan, moved closer. "I told him to keep his distance." Her words came evenly, each one deliberate, clean as a report. "They asked for identification?" Shaw asked. "No. You didn't volunteer it?" Amara met her eyes. "They didn't ask." The exchange ended there, short, conclusive, unarguable. Shaw's pen paused mid-motion before continuing. Rawlins nodded slowly. And then? I was restrained. How exactly? Pushed to the ground. One knee to the back, one hand forcing my wrist down. Her delivery never wavered, but something faint flickered under the words. Not anger, but memory. The sound of tile against skin. The sight of camera phones rising like periscopes of indifference. Were there witnesses? Several. Most recorded. Did you resist? I remained upright until I couldn't. Rawlins blinked once, but said nothing. The other two exchanged quick glances. Bureaucratic telegraphy, unreadable and safe. Amara waited. Her silence filled the room like fog, unignorable and patient. Finally, Shaw spoke again. Captain Lewis, when the officers discovered your identification at the precinct, what was their reaction? She could have said many things. About the look in their eyes, the way power drains out of a man when he realizes who he's been serving wrong. But she didn't. They realized what they'd done, she said simply. Did they apologize? Amara gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes. They tried. Rawlins nodded, jotting something down. And your response? Silence. The word landed like judgment. He set his pen down. Captain, this inquiry will determine whether disciplinary action is warranted. You understand the department has procedures for such incidents. I understand your procedures, she said. I've enforced them. Rawlins looked at her carefully. Then you know that intent is a factor. Misidentification, especially under ambiguous conditions. Amara cut in, her voice still even. There was nothing ambiguous about it. Her interruption wasn't emotional. It was surgical. The sentence cut through the fog of policy and landed clean. The two detectives beside Rawlins stiffened slightly, unsure whether to intervene or take notes. The report, she continued, will say what it always says. Perception, tension, rapid escalation. But none of that changes the truth. They saw what they were trained to see. The room quieted again. Rawlins' eyes lowered to his papers, but his hands stilled. Across the table, the recorder's red light blinked, steady and unfeeling. Shaw spoke softly now, almost respectfully. Do you wish to press charges, Captain Lewis? Amara looked past her, toward the wall where a framed mission statement hung. The words were faded at the edges, glass slightly smudged. Integrity, service, accountability. No, she said finally. Not against them. Rawlins raised an eyebrow. Then against whom? The system that made them. No one wrote that down. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Rawlins cleared his throat, grounding the conversation back into formality. This interview will be reviewed internally. You may be contacted again for further clarification. Of course, he gathered his notes, stacking them precisely, an act of control, of returning the world to order. Now you're free to go, Captain. Amara didn't rise immediately. The chair beneath her felt anchored to the floor, the table before her an emblem of division. When she finally stood, the legs of the chair scraped softly, the only sound of dissent in the sterile room. Rawlins extended a polite hand. She looked at it, then at him. After a moment, she shook it. His grip was too gentle, as though he were handling evidence. She walked to the door. Her reflection followed her across the glass wall, upright, deliberate, unbroken. Outside, the corridor stretched long and pale, lined with photographs of commendations and past chiefs. The light was the same sterile white that had followed her since the supermarket. She moved through it without haste, each step measured. At the far end, through the narrow window of the waiting area, she saw Whelan and Cruz sitting apart, their uniforms rumpled, their faces grey with exhaustion. Neither looked up as she passed. The automatic door sighed open. The night air met her like a quiet absolution, cool, unfiltered, alive. She paused on the steps, exhaling. Across the street, the city moved as if nothing had happened, neon signs blinking. Cars humming, 1,000 small lives continuing in ignorance. Behind her, the building's lights glowed through tinted glass, the shape of the table faintly visible within, still gleaming. Ready for the next story it would sanitize, Amara adjusted her jacket, the badge glinting faintly from her purse. Then she walked into the darkness, shoulders squared, her silence carrying farther than any statement ever could. The press room was too bright. Light ricocheted off polished floors, off the chrome trim of the podium, off the lenses of a dozen cameras trained toward the stage. It was the kind of brightness designed not to illuminate, but to sanitize, to bleach out the edges of what had happened. Rows of journalists murmured quietly, adjusting tripods, whispering names, checking the time. The seal of the city hung behind the podium, a circle of blue and gold authority, and below it, a small sign read, "Press Conference Incident Response." Captain Amara Lewis stood just behind the curtain, her badge in her hand. The metal felt colder than usual, its weight unfamiliar. She turned it once, twice, watching the overhead lights fracture across it. It didn't look like justice anymore. It looked like property. A young communications officer, barely out of his 20s, hair slicked with purpose, stepped toward her, voice hushed. "Captain Lewis, you'll stand next to the chief once he finishes. We'll take one photo, then you can make a brief statement." 2 minutes tops. She didn't answer. He hesitated, mistaking her silence for nerves. "Just stay close to the script. We want the public to know we're unified." Unified. The word floated in the air like smoke, visible, choking, meaningless. The curtain opened, applause and brief, uncertain, met the chief as he walked to the podium. His uniform was immaculate, every crease rehearsed. Behind him stood a wall of officers and administrators, their faces set in neutral solidarity. Amara joined them slightly apart, hands clasped before her. The chief began to speak. His tone was low, practiced, the voice of an institution managing optics. "Last week, an unfortunate misunderstanding occurred involving 2 of our officers and one of our own, Captain Amara Lewis." He paused for effect, scanning the crowd. "The department deeply regrets the incident. We take full responsibility for the distress caused." Regret. Responsibility, words without weight. They filled the air like a sermon no one believed. Cameras clicked in steady rhythm. The sound was mechanical, relentless, like the heartbeat of performance. The chief continued, "This department stands firmly against any form of bias or misconduct. We are committed to learning from this event and ensuring our community's trust remains strong." Applause followed again, louder this time. The journalists' pens moved quickly, translating performance into print. When the chief stepped aside, the communications officer nodded toward her. It was her turn. Amara approached the podium. The microphones bristled like a thicket of eyes. Each one waited for her to say the right thing, the soundbite, the salve, the closure. She placed the badge on the podium. It landed with a soft metallic sound that the microphones caught and magnified. A single echo filled the room. She looked out over the crowd, at the cameras, the notebooks, the faces trained to capture contrition. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. "I have no statement." Silence followed, long enough to make the audience uneasy. The chief shifted slightly behind her, his posture tightening. A reporter broke it. "Captain Lewis, do you accept the department's apology?" Her eyes moved toward the question's source, a man in a grey suit, pen poised like a weapon. "I acknowledge it," she said. "And will you be returning to duty?" "I haven't decided," another voice called out sharper. "Do you forgive the officers involved?" Amara didn't move. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the podium. The badge glinted under the lights. "I think forgiveness," she said, "requires change." No one clapped this time. She stepped away from the microphones. The chief began to speak again, smoothing the edges of her words, thanking the press, guiding attention back toward the department's commitment, its integrity, its future. But the story had already shifted. The silence she'd left behind filled the space more completely than any promise could. Outside, the flashes continued, white bursts of amnesia, each one erasing and recording at the same time. Behind closed doors, the chief's office was dimmer, smaller. The blinds were drawn, muting the daylight into a sterile grey. The air smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee. Amara stood before his desk, still holding her badge. The chief, Harold Beck, leaned forward, his voice low and tired. "You made them look bad." "They made themselves look bad," she said. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "You could have helped." A word of grace, a gesture. "The city's watching. They needed closure." "I'm not their closure. You know how this works." His tone sharpened. "We protect our own. But that protection has limits. You push too hard, and it turns into politics. Nobody wins." Amara looked at the framed photographs on his wall, officers shaking hands with mayors, award ceremonies under banners of unity. Every image was lit the same way, bright, forgiving, staged, She said quietly, "You think this was about winning." Beck frowned. "Isn't it always?" She placed the badge on his desk. "Not for me." He stared at it, the small symbol that once defined her, now lying flat between them like evidence. After a moment he asked, "You're refusing the reconciliation photo?" "Yes, people will talk. They already do." Beck leaned back, exhaling through his nose. His authority faltered, replaced by something more human, regret maybe, or the dull awareness of moral defeat. He said finally, "You've still got a career, Captain. Don't let this be what you're remembered for." Amara's eyes were calm, steady. "Then maybe the problem isn't what I'll be remembered for, Chief. Maybe it's what the department forgets." He had no answer to that. She turned and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, not final but complete. Outside, the press event had dissolved into chatter. Reporters packed away their gear. Officers posed for secondary shots. The air smelled of cologne and electricity. Amara moved through it like a ghost, untouched, unapproachable. The lights caught her briefly as she passed the podium, the badge still resting there, unclaimed. A photographer raised his camera, instinctively seeking closure in one last frame. But by the time the shutter clicked, she was already gone. Only the badge remained, a small, gleaming relic of authority, sitting on the podium under lights that refused to dim, amplifying nothing but the echo of its own emptiness. It was evening again, the same hour, the same sterile hush, when Captain Amara Lewis returned to the supermart. The parking lot gleamed with rain. Headlights cut white arcs across the asphalt, briefly illuminating puddles that reflected the store's sign like a half-forgotten truth. Open 24 hours. The words glowed steady, unblinking, indifferent. Inside, the air smelled the same, a blend of citrus cleanser and artificial calm. The hum of refrigeration units formed the same mechanical choir, constant and low. The tiles beneath her feet still reflected the ceiling lights in dull squares of white. Everything was where it had been. Everything had survived the story. Amara pushed a small basket in front of her. The wheels squeaked faintly, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Her hands were bare, no gloves, no badge, no pretense of armor. She walked the aisles slowly. Detergents, cereal boxes, canned goods, all stacked in obedient order. The shelves seemed taller now, the air heavier, but it was not fear that made it so. It was memory. The security camera above aisle 6 rotated softly, its red indicator blinking. She felt its gaze but did not flinch. It was not the camera that had changed. It was her understanding of it. That endless mechanical watcher that never learned, never blinked, never doubted its right to see. She paused before the shelf where the bottle had fallen weeks ago. The same brand lined the row, identical labels, uniform price tags. She picked one up and turned it in her hand. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, blue, calm, deceptive. The bottle was lighter than she remembered. Or maybe she was heavier now. A child laughed somewhere down the aisle. A cart rattled. Life had returned, unaltered. When she reached the checkout, the cashier, a young man with tired eyes, greeted her with a soft, automatic smile. "Evening, ma'am," she nodded. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but certain. "Evening," he scanned the bottle. The register beeped once, a sound that could have belonged to any day, any person. Behind them, another security camera watched. Its lens caught her face in its reflection, the same expression she had worn the night of the arrest, calm, contained, unreadable. But now there was something beneath it, a clarity sharper than defiance. The receipt printed. She took it without looking. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was damp, metallic. She stood under the awning, plastic bag in hand, and looked back through the glass. Inside, everything moved with procedural grace. Scanners beeping, doors sliding, cameras turning. The system breathed. It inhaled incidents, exhaled resolutions. It digested outrage, produced policy, and began again. No apology had changed it. No statement had bent its frame. The machine did not learn. It only endured, gusty, cold, humming, immortal, and yet so did she. Days passed. Then weeks. The city moved on as cities do. News cycles shifted. New scandals arrived to claim the front page. The footage from that night still lived online, clipped, dissected, debated. But even outrage had half-life. In the department, the investigation closed quietly. The officers were reassigned, not removed. The chief delivered another speech about moving forward together. The words settled into policy memos, which settled into silence. Amara returned to duty. Not to the same precinct, that would have been too neat, but to another district, another building of grey walls and hums. Her office was smaller now, her influence narrower, but her authority, the kind that doesn't need to be announced, and had deepened. On her desk sat the same badge. She hadn't turned it in after all. Each morning, she lifted it from its place, pinned it on, and felt the same weight, not of power, but of consequence. Her colleagues spoke to her carefully now, their courtesy exact. Some meant it, most didn't. But that was the nature of systems. They learned choreography, not morality, she carried on. She wrote reports. She signed forms. She attended meetings where people said the right things in the wrong ways. Her composure was perfect, her silence deliberate, and every so often, she thought of the floor, that cold white tile, the press of a stranger's knee against her back, the lens of a camera catching her reduced to an image. The memory no longer burned. It clarified. It reminded her that endurance was not submission. One late night she stayed past closing time, finishing a report. The precinct was empty except for the faint buzz of lights. On the far wall, the mission statement hung again. Integrity, service, accountability. The words hadn't changed, but she had. She rose, turned off her lamp, and caught her reflection in the dark window, the badge gleaming faintly against her chest, a mirror of persistence. For a moment she stood still, breathing. The sound was small but powerful, human breath filling an institutional void. Outside, the city glowed in soft fragments, streetlights flickering, buses grinding forward, the pulse of something vast and unfinished. And then one afternoon, she returned again to that same supermarket. It was almost identical. Same lights, same clerk, same hum of machines. Only this time, when she reached the checkout, the security camera turned and fixed its unblinking gaze upon her again. Amara looked straight back. The two silences, mechanical and human, faced each other across the air. She lifted her chin slightly. Steady, calm, the light above her flickered once, briefly, as if the building itself had taken a breath. And in that instant, the reflection in the convex security mirror caught her figure perfectly. Upright, still, framed beneath the endless white light. A woman who'd been broken open and then rebuilt. Not softer, not angrier, but clearer. Her bag hung at her side, her breath steady, her presence undeniable. Nothing in the world around her had changed, but she had learned to stand within it, visible, unbent, unyielding. The fluorescent hum continued, indifferent. The system breathed, and so did she.